The autumn wind carried the scent of rain through the streets of Portland as I rushed home. My phone buzzed in my pocket. The number flashing across the screen made my heart sink. Portland Memorial Hospital. My hands trembled as I answered. The nurse's voice was gentle but firm. My father, Robert Bennett, had been in a serious collision while making a delivery for his small furniture business. I needed to come immediately. 20 minutes felt like an eternity. When I arrived, my mother, Grace, was already there, her face pale and drawn. My little brother Tommy stood beside her, his teenage bravado crumbling as tears streamed down his face. The doctor approached us, his steps and words both carefully measured. My father had died from his injuries. The impact was too severe. There was nothing they could have done. I held my mother as her knees buckled. Her weak heart made every emotional shock a serious danger. Tommy wrapped his arms around both of us, our small family suddenly feeling impossibly smaller. The funeral was on a gray Thursday morning. Rain drummed against the umbrella I held over Mom's head. Only a handful of people came. Dad was a quiet man. He worked hard, loved his family, and asked for little from the world. As they lowered his casket into the ground, I made a silent promise. I would take care of Grace and Tommy. I would keep our family together, no matter what. 1 week later, that promise was tested in a way I could never have imagined. I was at our small kitchen table, surrounded by bills and bank statements. The numbers just wouldn't add up. Dad's business had some debts, but nothing we couldn't handle with time. The real problem was Mom's medication, nearly $4,000 a month. And Tommy had one more year of high school, then college. A sharp, authoritative knock echoed through the apartment. I opened the door to two men in expensive charcoal suits. Their faces showed no warmth, only professional detachment. The older man, Mr. Harrison, carried a leather briefcase with golden clasps. "Miss Bennett," he said, "we need to discuss your father's financial situation." Ice formed in my stomach. I let them in. Refusing seemed impossible. Mr. Harrison sat at our worn kitchen table and opened his briefcase. He pulled out documents with practiced efficiency. Banks, statements, loan agreements, property assessments. Each page only deepened my confusion. "Your father owed $6 million to Westmore Enterprises," Mr. Harrison stated, without a trace of emotion. "He took loans using properties as collateral. Those properties do not exist. The signatures on several documents appear to have been forged." The words hit me like physical blows. My father would never commit fraud. He was honest to a fault, sometimes losing business because he refused to cut corners. "That can't be right," I whispered. My father would never do something like that. The second man, younger, with cold blue eyes, spread more papers across the table. Each document seemed to confirm the impossible. Dates, amounts, signatures that looked chillingly like my father's handwriting. Just then, Mom entered the room. She froze in the doorway, one hand pressed to her chest. Tommy appeared behind her, his eyes wide with fear. "We don't have $6 million, I said, forcing my voice to remain steady. "We have almost nothing." Mr. Harrison nodded as if he expected this. He reached back into his briefcase and pulled out a different document, thicker than the others, bound in black leather. "Mr. Westmore anticipated your situation. He has prepared an alternative arrangement." I took the document with numb fingers. The words on the first page made no sense. Marriage contract. 18-month term. Complete debt forgiveness. "Mr. Westmore is willing to forgive the entire debt," Mr. Harrison explained in the same flat tone. "In exchange, you will agree to marry him for a period of 18 months. At the end of that time, you may file for divorce. No penalties, no further obligations." The room seemed to tilt. I gripped the edge of the table to steady myself. "You want me to marry a stranger to pay off a debt? Additionally," he continued, "Mr. Westmore will cover all medical expenses for your mother and ensure your brother receives a full scholarship to any university of his choosing." I looked at my mother's shocked face, at Tommy's frightened expression. This was insane. This had to be illegal, immoral, impossible. People don't buy wives in the modern world? Why would he want this? I demanded. Why would a billionaire need to buy a wife? Mr. Westmore's reasons are his own. Mr. Harrison replied coolly. You have 48 hours to provide your answer. After they left, a terrible silence filled the apartment. Mom was the first to speak, her voice breaking. You can't do this, sweetheart. I won't let you sell yourself for us. but my mind was already racing. We had no savings. The apartment was rented. Mom's condition was getting worse, and Tommy? He deserved a chance at college, a future better than the one poverty would give him. "It's only 18 months, I said quietly, trying to convince myself as much as them. I can survive anything for 18 months. That night, I researched Julian Westmore. The internet was full of information. He was 35, self-made, ruthless in business. His company owned properties across 15 countries, his net worth estimated at $12 billion. But there was something else. 3 years ago, his wife had died in a sailing accident. After that, Julian Westmore had vanished from public life. No social events, no charity galas, only business meetings and boardrooms. On the second day I made the call, Mr. Harrison answered immediately. "I'll do it," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "I'll marry him. A car will arrive tomorrow at noon. Bring one suitcase. Everything else will be provided." That night I found my father's old journal. I hadn't been able to look at it since his death. The last entry was dated 2 days before the accident. "I thought I could fix everything, but I have only made things worse. Julian Westmore knows the truth now. God forgive me for what I have brought upon my family." My hands shook. My father knew Julian Westmore. This marriage contract wasn't random. It was connected to something deeper, something my father was part of. The next day at noon sharp, a black luxury car pulled up. I hugged Mom and Tommy, promising that everything would be okay. The drive lasted 3 hours, winding into the mountains north of the city until we passed through massive iron gates. Beyond them stood a house of glass and steel built into the mountainside, overlooking a silver lake. My beautiful prison for the next 18 months. An older woman with kind eyes and silver hair opened the door. "Welcome, Miss Bennett, and Mrs. Catherine, the housekeeper. Mr. Westmore is waiting for you in the library." I followed her through hallways filled with modern art and furniture that probably cost more than our apartment. She stopped at double doors of dark wood and knocked softly. "Sir, Miss Bennett has arrived." "Send her in," a deep voice commanded from inside. I took a breath and opened the door. The man standing by the floor-to-ceiling windows was tall and broad-shouldered. When he turned, I felt something shift in my chest. Julian Westmore was handsome in a harsh, controlled way. Sharp features, eyes the color of winter storms. But it was the sadness in those eyes that struck me. This was a man who had lost something precious and never recovered. "Miss Bennett," he said, his voice formal and distant. "Thank you for coming. Did I have a choice?" I replied, unable to keep the edge from my voice. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise? Respect? "No," he admitted quietly. "You did not. But I want you to understand something. This arrangement serves both our purposes. You gain your family's freedom. I gain what I need." "And what do you need?" I challenged. His jaw tightened. "That is not part of our agreement." He moved to his desk and picked up the marriage contract. "We will be married in 4 days. Private ceremony. You will live here. We'll have separate rooms and separate lives. In 18 months, you will be free to leave with enough money to build whatever future you choose." I looked at this man who held my family's fate in his hands. "My father knew you, didn't he?" Question hung in the air. For a long moment, Julian didn't answer. Then very quietly he said, "Yes, he did." "What happened between you?" His voice became hard as stone. "That is none of your concern." He was lying. I could see it in the way his hands clenched, in the tension that ran through his shoulders. This marriage was about more than debt. It was about something darker, something that connected my father's death to this man's grief. "I will find out the truth," I said softly. His eyes met mine, and for a second, I saw something break through his cold exterior. Pain deep and old and still bleeding. "Perhaps you will," he said, "but it will not change anything." As I left the library, I realized I had just agreed to marry a man who was as much a prisoner of the past as I was of this contract. And somewhere in that past was the answer to why my father had died and why Julian Westmore needed a wife he believed he could never love. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. The wedding was a quiet affair, held in the estate's garden on a crisp autumn morning. There were no guests, only the housekeeper, Mrs. Catherine, and Julian's business partner, Mr. Harrison, as witnesses. A judge from the city conducted the ceremony with a professional, detached air. I wore a simple ivory dress that Mrs. Catherine had somehow found in my exact size. Julian stood beside me in a dark suit, his face a complete mystery. When the judge pronounced us husband and wife, he didn't kiss me. He just gave a single curt nod and walked back into the house alone. Mrs. Catherine touched my arm gently. "Give him time, dear," she whispered. "He is not as cold as he appears." I wanted to believe her, but everything screamed otherwise. My new room was vast, larger than the entire apartment I once shared with my family. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the lake. The furniture was elegant, whispering of old money. A walk-in closet was already filled with clothes, all in my size, from casual outfits to stunning evening gowns. On the nightstand, a new phone and a credit card with my name on it lay waiting. A note in bold, sharp handwriting read, "For anything you need. No limit." I set the card aside. I hadn't married Julian for his wealth. I had married him to save my family. The first week was a study in strange, echoing silence. The estate was a labyrinth of wings and levels built into the mountainside. I barely saw Julian. He left for his city office before sunrise and returned long after dark. We never shared a meal. Our conversations were limited to brief, polite greetings if we happened to pass in a hallway. Mrs. Catherine became my only real companion. She was warm and chatty, filling the empty spaces with stories about the estate and careful remarks about the weather, a welcome distraction from the oppressive quiet. One afternoon, while exploring, I found a locked room. The door was just slightly ajar, as if someone had forgotten to close it properly. Curiosity got the better of me. I pushed it open and stepped inside. It was an art studio, filled with canvases and the scent of oil paint. Paintings leaned against every wall, some finished, some abandoned. The style was breathtakingly beautiful, yet haunting. There were landscapes of stormy seas and portraits of a woman with dark flowing hair and eyes that sparkled with life. I moved closer to one portrait. The woman was captured in a moment of pure joy, her head thrown back in laughter. It was Victoria. I spun around, my heart leaping into my throat. Julian stood in the doorway, his expression tight with a pain so raw it was palpable. "I'm sorry," I said quickly. "I didn't mean to intrude." He stepped into the room, his gaze sweeping over the paintings. "She loved to paint," he said, his voice distant. "She said it helped her see the beauty in ordinary things." It was the most he had ever said to me. I stood still, sensing he needed to speak. "We met in college," he continued. "She was studying art. I was studying business. Everyone said we were too different. But she made me see the world differently. She made me better." "What happened to her?" I asked. My voice barely a whisper. His jaw clenched. "She went sailing with friends. A storm came up suddenly. The boat capsized. Only 2 of the 5 people on board survived. Victoria was not one of them." The grief in his voice was fresh, as if the wound had just been inflicted. "I am so sorry," I whispered. Julian turned to face me, and for the first time I saw the full, crushing weight of his loss. "Your father was on that boat?" The words hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the back of a chair to keep from falling. "What?" "Robert Bennett was one of the survivors," Julian said, his voice hardening into steel. "He was the one steering the boat when the storm hit. He made decisions that day, decisions that cost Victoria her life." The room started to spin. My father had never mentioned a sailing accident. He'd never spoken of a Victoria or a Julian Westmore. "There must be some mistake," I stammered, but a cold dread washed over me as I remembered a cryptic entry in my father's journal. His words about terrible mistakes and bringing trouble to his family. "There is no mistake," Julian said coldly. "Your father testified at the inquest. He said he panicked. He tried to turn the boat around instead of riding out the storm. That decision capsized them." Tears burned my eyes. If my father made a mistake, it wasn't on purpose. He would never deliberately hurt anyone. "Intentional or not, Victoria is gone," Julian stated flatly. "And your father spent the last 3 years scrambling for money any way he could. He came to me 6 months ago wanting to invest in my company. He forged documents to make his finances look better than they were. When I found out, I told him I would hold him accountable for everything. The debt, the lies, all of it. The horrifying truth crashed down on me. "That's why you proposed this marriage," I realized, my voice shaking. "You want revenge?" His expression was unreadable. "I want justice. Your father took the person I loved most in this world. Now his daughter lives under my roof. bound to me by law. Perhaps that is justice enough. A surge of anger rose to meet my pain. I am not my father. I had nothing to do with what happened on that boat. No, Julian agreed softly. You didn't, but you are all I have left to balance the scales. He walked out of the studio, leaving me alone among the ghosts of a dead woman and the wreckage of my father's secrets. That night, I called my mother. Her voice was frail and anxious. "How are you, sweetheart? Is everything all right?" I wanted to scream, to tell her everything, to ask about the sailing accident, about Victoria, about the lies. But I heard the weakness in her voice and knew I couldn't add to her burden. "Everything is fine, Mom," I lied. "The house is beautiful. Julian is busy with work. How's Tommy?" We talked for 20 minutes about normal things, my brother's grades, the new medication that seemed to be helping her heart. When I hung up, the feeling of isolation was suffocating. The next few days brought small, confusing changes. One morning, fresh flowers appeared in a vase on my nightstand. Mrs. Catherine swore she knew nothing about them. Another day, a new easel and art supplies were in my room with a note, "In case you inherited your father's creative side." I couldn't tell if these were gestures of kindness or subtle forms of cruelty. I suspected Julian didn't know either. One rainy evening, I was reading in the library when Julian came home early. He stopped, surprised to see me. "I can leave," I offered. "No," he said after a pause. "Stay." He poured himself a drink and sat in the armchair opposite me. We sat in silence, with only the sound of rain drumming against the windows. "Why did you agree to this?" he asked suddenly. "Could have refused. Found another way?" I closed my book. "My mother is dying. The medication she needs costs more than I could earn in 3 jobs. My brother deserves to go to college. There was no other way." He studied my face. "You sacrificed yourself for them. They're my family," I said simply. "What else would I do?" Something in his expression shifted. For a fleeting moment, the armor of anger cracked, and I saw the man beneath it. "Victoria would have done the same," he said quietly. "She always put others first. Sometimes I hated that about her. She would give everything away and keep nothing for herself." "She sounds like someone worth loving," I said. His eyes met mine. She was. And losing her nearly destroyed me. The raw honesty in his voice touched me. This wasn't a monster. This was a broken man, using anger as glue to hold himself together. "I understand wanting someone to blame," I said softly. "When my own father died, I was angry at everyone. But anger doesn't bring them back. It just keeps us trapped in the past." Julian looked away, toward the dark rain-streaked window. "The past is all I have left of her." "No," I said. "You have her paintings, her love for beauty, the way she changed how you see the world. Those things aren't in the past. They're part of who you are now." He was silent for a long time. Then he stood and walked to the window, his back to me. "You should hate me," he said, his voice thick. "I'm using you to punish a dead man." "I don't hate you," I replied. "I pity you. You have everything money can buy, but you're all alone in this beautiful house, surrounded by ghosts." Julian turned, and I saw the glint of unshed tears in his eyes. "I don't know how to let her go," he whispered. I crossed the room to stand beside him. I didn't touch him, but my presence was a quiet offer of comfort. "Maybe you don't have to let her go," I said. "Maybe you just have to make room for something new alongside her memory." We stood there together as the rain fell, a silent truce forming between us. The wall of anger and grief had a crack in it now, and through that tiny opening, a fragile possibility of connection was starting to grow. Later that night, I found another note on my pillow in Julian's bold script. "Thank you for your honesty. I have forgotten what that feels like." I folded the note and put it away. I didn't know if he could ever forgive my father, or if 18 months would be enough to heal 3 years of wounds. But for the first time since coming here, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this marriage wasn't just about debt and revenge. Maybe it was about 2 broken people finding their way back to a kind of peace. As I fell asleep, I thought of Victoria's paintings, of the joy she found in ordinary things. Maybe that was her legacy. That beauty can exist alongside pain, and that love. Love might just bloom in the most unexpected of places. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more. The morning after their conversation in the library, Sophia woke to find an envelope slipped under her door. Inside was a handwritten invitation in Julian's precise script, Join me for breakfast on the terrace at 8 o'clock. It was the first meal they would share since the wedding. Sophia dressed carefully and found her way to the terrace overlooking the lake. Julian was already there. "Good morning," he said, and his voice carried a warmth she had not heard before. They sat at a small table where Mrs. Catherine had laid out fresh pastries and fruit. The autumn sun painted the lake in shades of gold and amber. "I wanted to apologize," Julian said after a moment. "For what I said about justice and revenge. You were right. You were not your father. It was wrong of me to punish you for his mistakes." Sophia was surprised by his directness. "Thank you for saying that," Julian continued. "I have been thinking about what you said, about being trapped by ghosts. I realized I've been so focused on what I lost that I stopped seeing what is still here." "What changed?" Sophia asked. "You did," Julian said simply. "You came into this house with every reason to hate me. I forced you into a marriage you did not want, yet you showed me kindness. You listened when I talked about Victoria. You did not judge me for my grief." Sophia felt her heart soften. Grief is not something to be judged. It is just love with nowhere to go. Julian's eyes held hers. "Where did you learn to be so wise?" "From watching my father," Sophia said. "After my mother got sick, he never complained. He just worked harder and loved us more fiercely. He wanted to fill whatever days he had left with as much love as possible." Julian was quiet for a moment. "I wish I could have known that version of your father. The man I knew was desperate and dishonest. But maybe that desperation came from the same place. Does that make what he did right?" Sophia asked. "No," Julian admitted. "But it makes him human." They finished breakfast talking about simpler things. Sophia told him about her work as a graphic designer. Julian shared stories about building his company from nothing. The conversation flowed easily, naturally, as though they had known each other for years instead of weeks. Over the following days, Julian made small efforts to include Sophia in his life. He came home earlier from work. He invited her to join him for dinner. They took walks around the estate grounds, talking about everything and nothing. Sophia learned that Julian loved classical music, but couldn't carry a tune. Julian discovered that Sophia was terrible at chess, but brilliant at solving puzzles. One evening, they were walking by the lake when Julian stopped suddenly. "I want to show you something," he said. He led her to a boathouse she had not noticed before. Inside was a beautiful wooden sailboat, covered in dust from disuse. "This was Victoria's," Julian said. "She loved sailing. After she was gone, I could not bring myself to sell it. Thought keeping it was a way of keeping her memory alive. But now I wonder if I was just keeping myself stuck." Sophia ran her hand along the smooth wood. "What do you want to do with it?" Julian looked at the boat, then at Sophia. "I think I want to sail again, not to replace what happened or forget Victoria, but to remember that she loved the water because it made her feel free." "Would you teach me?" Sophia asked. Julian smiled, and it transformed his entire face. "I would like that very much." The next Saturday, they took the boat out on the lake. The autumn air was crisp and clean. Julian showed Sophia how to handle the ropes and adjust the sails. She was clumsy at first, laughing at her own mistakes, but Julian was patient, guiding her hands with his own. As they glided across the water, Sophia watched the tension melt from his shoulders. He looked younger, lighter. "Thank you," Julian said suddenly. "For what?" "For giving me this," he said. "I have not felt this peaceful in 3 years." Sophia felt warmth spread through her chest. "You gave it to yourself. You just needed someone to remind you it was possible." That night, Julian knocked on her door. "I know we agreed to separate lives," he said, "but I was wondering if you would like to watch a movie with me." Mrs. Catherine made popcorn. Sophia smiled. "I would love to." They settled into the comfortable chairs in his private sitting room. Halfway through the old detective film, Sophia found herself laughing. She glanced over and caught Julian watching her instead of the screen. "What?" she asked. "Nothing," Julian said softly. "I just realized I have not heard enough laughter in this house. I like the sound of it." Something electric passed between them. He leaned slightly closer, his eyes searching hers. The moment was interrupted by her phone buzzing urgently. Her mother's name flashed on the screen. "I need to take this," she said, stepping into the hallway. "Sophia," her mother's voice was strained with pain. "Tommy called an ambulance. My chest. Cannot breathe properly." Fear shot through Sophia's body. "I am coming right now," Which hospital? She rushed back into the room. Julian was already standing, reading the alarm on her face. My mother, Sophia said, her voice shaking. She is having a heart episode. I need to get to Portland. I will drive you, Julian said immediately. I want to. Let me help. They made the drive in record time, Julian holding her hand when she started to shake. At the hospital, a doctor approached them. Your mother had a severe arrhythmia episode. We've stabilized her for now, but her heart is weakening. She needs a transplant soon, or the next episode could be fatal. Sophia felt the world tilt. How soon? Within the next 6 months. After the doctor left, Sophia sank into a chair, and Julian sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders. We will find a way, he said quietly. I can pay for the best specialists. We can get her moved up on the transplant list. Money cannot buy a heart, Sophia whispered. We just have to wait and hope. In the hospital cafeteria, Sophia finally allowed herself to cry. Julian held her, offering his presence as comfort. I am terrified of losing her, she admitted. Then we give her every chance we can, Julian said. Whatever she needs, whatever it costs, I will make it happen. Sophia looked up at him through her tears. Why are you being so kind to me? Julian wiped a tear from her cheek. It stopped being business the moment I started caring about you. The words hung in the air. Julian, you do not have to say anything, he said quickly. I know this is complicated, but somewhere along the way, you became important to me. Sophia felt something break open inside her. You became important to me too. I did not expect that, but it happened anyway. He cupped her face in his hands. What do we do about it? I do not know, she whispered. Then let me make one thing certain, Julian said. Leaned forward and kissed her softly, gently. When they pulled apart, Sophia was trembling. I am afraid, she admitted. What if you are just transferring your need to save someone from Victoria to me? Julian shook his head. What I feel for you is different. Victoria was my first love. She taught me how to love. But you are teaching me how to love again after I thought that part of me died with her. That is its own kind of miracle. Over the next weeks, Grace slowly recovered. Julian arranged for the best cardiac specialists and treated Tommy like family. Sophia watched Julian transform into a warm and generous man. One evening, he took her back to Victoria's studio. I want to donate her paintings to the art museum, he said. Victoria always wanted her work to bring joy to others. He then took Sophia's hand. I need to tell you something. I have been thinking about our agreement, about the divorce. Sophia's heart stuttered. What about it? I do not want it, Julian said simply. I do not want this to end. I want you to stay. Not because of a contract, because you choose to. Tears filled Sophia's eyes. I choose you. I choose this. I choose us. He pulled her into his arms. I love you, Julian said. I know it is fast. I know it is complicated. But it is true. I love you too, Sophia whispered. I think I have loved you since the day you trusted me with your pain. They stood together, surrounded by paintings of the woman who taught Julian how to love. And Sophia understood that she was not replacing Victoria. She was writing a new chapter. 6 months later, Grace received a new heart. I got accepted to his first-choice university. And Sophia and Julian renewed their vows in the garden where they had first been married. This time, friends and family came to celebrate a love that had grown from the most unexpected soil. As they danced under the stars, Julian whispered, Thank you for saving me. We saved each other, Sophia replied. And in that moment, surrounded by love and light, they both finally understood what it meant to be truly free. Thank you so much for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more content like this. We'll see you in the next one.